From the ruins of the First World War emerged two brothers and a bloodline of visionaries. But fairy tales like that don't last forever. When the world was embroiled in the Second World War, a small town in Germany saw itself amidst another war, the infamous Shoe War. Adolf and Rudolf had their sights set. If ripping apart their legacy what it took to reign supreme, they would. And so, in 1948, Gebruder Dassler's Fabrik, also called Geda, dissolved and two shoe houses propped up on either side of the river in the small town. These two shoe houses would go on to become Adidas and PUMA, the brands built through sheer grit and rivalry. For over 50 years, no one dared to cross the river and enter the town run by the rival brand. And if someone did, they could never come back. This is the tale of two brothers, two brands, and one bitter rivalry that lasted for the better half of a century. Today, these billion-dollar companies are everywhere. Even your favorite footballer wears it. If you enjoyed this video, click that like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below on what video you would like to see next. So get comfortable, grab something to drink, and let's travel back in time to the year 1919, to a quaint little town in southern Germany, Herzogenaurach. Well before Adidas and Puma were plastered on every athlete's face, before they became a household name, they started in a small town in Nazi Germany called Herzogenaurach. Adolf and Rudolf, commonly referred to as Adi and Rudy, had returned from the war and come back to a town they couldn't recognize. The victorious Allies had imposed sanctions and treaties that led Germany into a vicious economic depression in 1919. Adi, a trained baker, quickly realized that the economy had taken a nosedive so bad, people wouldn't purchase bread or any baked goods. So he moved back into his mother's basement. He realized there was one commodity that the poverty-stricken Germans would purchase: sturdy shoes. So he abandoned his culinary skills for shoemaking. Even then, he understood that the people wouldn't buy an expensive shoe, and as such, had to get nifty with the materials used to create a pair of shoes. He made do with army helmets, and bread pouches supplied leather for soles. Parachutes could supply silk for slippers, and within no time, owing to his mastery, Adi Dassler had successfully started a business. Soon enough, he brought his brother on board, and a slew of successful years later, they decided to register their company, Gebruder Dassler Fabrik, in the year 1924. Rudy was gifted with the art of sales. He could bring newer and bigger clients to the company, while Adi perfected his product a little more each year. They moved into a proper facility and soon began mass producing their one-of-a-kind shoes. Adi had his eye out for sports shoes. He designed them using kangaroo leather and shark skin. His formula was simple. He wanted to make it lightweight yet sturdy. Within the span of 4 years in 1928, Geda's shoes were being worn by athletes and sportspersons globally. Lena Radke, a German middle-distance runner, won gold in 1928, wore Dassler track shoes. Likewise, a German gold medal runner wore Dassler shoes at the 1932 Los Angeles Games. The Dassler brothers' invention had become a symbol of national pride. With Hitler coming to power in the following years, the Dassler brothers joined the racial nationalist movement, realizing there would be economic profits to be made through political action. And profits did follow. The Dassler shoes became a household name. However, success wasn't the only thing knocking on the doors of the Dassler brothers. Love did too. Adi Dassler married Kathi while she was 16 years old. This would begin a history of disputes which would ultimately lead to rivalry. The seeds of bitterness created discontent amidst the brothers, with Rudolf finding Adi's wife repulsive. He didn't like the fact that Kathi wished to run the business alongside the brothers, and cited her lack of experience as the reason for it. Ironically, she ends up as the CEO of Adidas in the years to come. The darkest days befell upon the Dasslers. Not a decade later, in 1936, they had made a breakthrough. The fastest runner in the world, Jesse Owens, had affiliated himself with Adi's shoes. Owens had commented, "I would either wear these shoes or no shoes while competing." However, this wouldn't bode well for their Nazi affiliations. Alongside Aryans, Africans were also discriminated against as well. Adi striking a deal with soon-to-be two-time gold medalist track star would be considered blasphemy. Regardless, Adi and his coach, Weitzer, took an executive decision to proceed with it to globalize their brand. Dassler saw the 1936 Berlin Olympics as the key springboard for international exposure. Jesse Owens went on to win several medals, and this move catapulted the brand into stardom. This move that went against their political agenda quite literally saved their company in the future. However, the simmering tensions could no longer be masked by their success. Adi was conscripted to serve in the Wehrmacht in 1940, and subsequently began training as a radio technician.
This is a war between the factories.
However, in 1941, he was relieved of his duty. As great of a salesperson that Rudy was, the genius behind the invention was Adi. However, Rudy was soon drafted for war, and upon returning to the wasteland that Herzogenaurach had become, his antipathy towards Adi had just turned into bitter hatred. Rudy was convinced that Adi and his wife had ratted him out to the Americans, and this was a planned and strategized move to kick Rudy out of Gaeta. Rudy understood that this would enable his brother to gain sole ownership of something they had worked hard to create. In order to retaliate, Rudy used his powers to deny jobs to his sister's sons, thus forcing them to take part in the war. Adi frowned upon this behavior, and it tore the family into shreds. And as if things couldn't get any worse, the Reich became a total war machine with the impending World War II. He ordered Gaeta to curtail its shoe production to provide material for wartime efforts. Even curtailing activities by half drove Gaeta into the ground. Matters got worse in terms of available labor. In order to turn around this situation, Adi requested for the assistance of prisoners of war to keep the factory running. 6 months into the year of 1943, the factory had to finally shut down. This was a move done by the top brass, which involved converting all industry to military production. If on one side the brothers silently fought a war, Germany was being targeted by America for the genocidal ideologies that Nazi Germany propagated. Efforts to denazify Germany began in 1946 as the entire world stood still in fear of Hitler. Remember when we said that sponsoring Jesse Owens would later save their lives and the company as well? The American troops had started arresting the Nazis and shutting down companies that engaged in war profiteering. When American troops discovered that the Dassler factory was where the shoes for Owens' Olympic victories were made, they decided to let the works remain standing, and indeed, many of the troops became good customers. Rudy, consumed by his hatred for Adi, told the panel about Adi's involvement in the Nazi movement, thus demanding he be sentenced for 10 years. Adi, however, was vetted by the mayor of Herzogenaurach, who was trusted by the Allies. During this time, Rudy was acquitted by the panel and sought any means necessary to gain total control of Gaeta. Adi, however, proved that his participation was no more than a mere follower and gained his acquittal. And this was the final nail in the coffin. The pioneers of sports shoes had decided to never speak again. Mother Paulina supported Friedel and Rudolf, who took care of her for the remainder of her life. Adi and Kathy were supported by their sister Marie, who never forgave Rudolf for the death of her boys. Rudolf left their house and relocated across the river to gain control of the Dassler company's second facility. Adi kept the first factory in the family home after they split, and while the public split of the brothers was the talk of the town, other reasons for the split started surfacing. It was said that years earlier, near the start of the war, the brothers had begun feuding over the design of the shoes, and making matters worse, their wives grew to hate each other. The two couples lived in the same villa, and over time, passive aggression turned into open criticism and fighting. Another instance that the gossip columns couldn't stop talking about allegedly went something like this. During the war, a growing rift between the pair reached a breaking point after an Allied bomb attack in 1943 when Adi and his wife climbed into a bomb shelter that Rudolf and his family were already in. "The dirty pigs are back again," Adi said, apparently referring to the Allied warplanes, but Rudolf was convinced his brother meant him and his family. This family has weathered rumors of affairs, wars, and much more that the historians are uncertain of to this day. But one thing was certain: the world was waiting, patiently waiting to witness the beginning of an era and the end of an epoch. Gebruder Dassler Schuhfabrik was no longer. The world was ready for Adidas and Puma. As Adi stood there in his factory, reliving what had transpired, he realized that he was thrust into the same plight as 1919. Germany's economy was fragile from all the wars, and the spirits of the people were disintegrating. The material needed to create the shoe were far too scarce. However, this time around, there was another problem. The factory had turned into a war machinery production house, and to revert back to a shoe factory wasn't easy. As if these conditions weren't horrendous to navigate through, given the option to either stay with Rudi or Adi. As Rudolf was a great salesman, most of the sales staff went along with him. In a similar manner, the factory workers, technicians, and designers stayed back with Adi, owing to his creative genius. This meant Adi retained 2/3 of the employees, and the rest went away with Rudi to the other side of the River Arak. The shoe wars had just begun, and the competition was fierce. Adi had used his nickname and merged it with his last name and created Adidas in 1949. Rudolf originally contemplated naming his firm Ruda before deciding on Puma in the year 1957. Adi quickly realized that a good product sells itself. He aspired to make a product that could be distinguished easily, something that screamed athletic. He settled for the 3 stripes that we've grown up with and registered the logo with the company trademark. The Puma logo included a puma leaping over the word mark for the brand. The logo became the foundation for the image most people associate with Puma to this day. Over the years, the company experimented with using different variations of this logo, much like Adidas. The companies boomed so much that it was said that at least one member from every family was working either for Adidas or Puma. The river that ran between the 2 factories acted like a mini Berlin Wall. The families avoided speaking to each other the moment they realized that any member was working for the rival company. They patronized separate bars, bakeries, and barber shops. Life had taken a turn. What was once a meek little town now housed 2 shoe giants. This fact seeped into a person's life deeply. From the clothes they wore to the teams they supported was all dictated by Adidas or Puma. Funnily enough, due to people's habit of looking at each other's shoes to see whether they were affiliated with Adidas or Puma, Herzogenaurach got the nickname the Town of Bent Necks. Germany, despite its unspeakable past, was allowed to participate in the World Cup in 1954. Adidas took advantage of this opportunity to sponsor West Germany's national team. West Germany's national team manager, Sepp Herberger, awarded the contract for expansion to Adidas. Adi, the man who reinvented sporting shoes, had worked a miracle again. He created removable screw studs specially designed to prevent slipping in case of rain. And when West Germany won the World Cup amidst a storm, the genius of Adolf Dassler shone through. Adidas had launched itself in front of the whole world, and by the looks of it, winning the numbers game as well. Adidas clocked in record sales, but Puma wasn't about to go down silently. In the year 1970, Pelé, a famous Brazilian star athlete, wore shoes manufactured by Puma. And in a stunt of genius advertising, a moment before the game began, he bent over to tie his Puma shoes, thus associating himself with the other shoe giant in the market. And just like that, Pelé landed an effortless win for his team, thrusting him and Puma into the international sphere. Soon enough, the brands were seen engaging in maniacally cutthroat levels of competition, both in Germany and worldwide, constantly trying to one-up each other. Despite such a bittersweet and broken family, one thing is certain. The rivalry between 2 brothers turned into 2 multi-billion-dollar companies. Year after year, they have reinvented the sports and athletic apparel industry. Adidas and Puma stood the test of time, through wars, battle, loss, and love. And they emerged successful. Today, Adidas stands at 29.91 billion euros, while Puma stands at 7.78 billion euros as 2 publicly traded companies. And though the town of Herzogenaurach slowly tries to overcome the invisible Berlin Wall, it would take decades more to come for the rivalry to dissolve completely. The Adidas PUMA rivalry has etched itself into the sportswear industry. A story so unforgettable that the tale as old as time is retold to this day through videos like ours, books, movies, all at your fingertips. In 1974, just 6 months before Rudy's death, they got their drivers to take them to a secret meeting in Nuremberg for half a day, says Helmut Fischer, the peace match referee and Puma's in-house historian. Perhaps the love of brotherhood stood the test of time, much like their companies. Perhaps not. Only Adolf Dassler and Rudolf Dassler hold answers to it all.